Hi HR Nation, it's Chris Rainey. Welcome to HR Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR leaders. Today's guest is Claire Gillingham. Claire is the HR Director for Group Commercial Operations and Strategy at Vodafone. Claire, welcome to the show.
Chris, thank you. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. Tell HR leaders a little bit more about yourself and your journey to becoming a HR Director at Vodafone.
Gosh, a long journey, so I'll try not to go into too much detail. I really fell into HR. I was doing a degree in business and finance, mainly because I had no idea what I wanted to do. But as the degree went on, I kind of thought I'd go and become a trader in London, become a millionaire and retire at the age of 35. Sadly, that didn't happen, and instead I ended up temping at Sainsbury's in the summer of my final year of uni. In the HR department, and then they contacted me at Christmas and offered me a full-time job. I was a struggling student and I had the opportunity to work full-time and carry on with my studies. So that's kind of how I entered into HR. I spent about 3 years with Sainsbury's, which was great fun, generalist HR, really learning the roots of how HR works. But found the organisation probably a little bit slow and steady for what I wanted. So I left slow and steady and went to the crazy world of telecoms, which was around 2000. And it was a mad time when telecoms was really going through huge growth. It was about acquisitions. We were just looking at 3G licenses at the time. And I had a crazy year of massive growth with this organization. It was an American company, and the bubble did burst. The American company declared Chapter 11, and I had a really unique opportunity to then work with PwC to do, when the company went into administration, and to work on sort of selling the company off and closing it down, which was fantastic. Decided to go and do some sort of more, I suppose, safer, large multinational, and went and joined Siemens. Well, I was there for about 4 years. I started in generalist HR and then moved into bids, outsourcing, and mergers and acquisitions, and got the taste for working in global organisations. One of my clients was actually RBS, who had been doing a huge amount of outsourcing work, and I'd worked closely with RBS, the Royal Bank of Scotland, GPing a large number of their staff from RBS to Siemens. And they then approached me to go and work for them. I was ready for a change, so I joined RBS at the time when the financial services was still was a highly sought after industry to work in. It was well regarded. RBS was highly regarded. And then I worked with RBS for 9 years. So a variety of roles. In the early days, I was actually involved in the acquisition of ABN AMRO. Which was, from an HR perspective, was fascinating. It was bringing about 20,000 employees into the organisation, which was a huge program to be involved in. Sadly, we then had the financial crisis, and RBS became the most hated organisation in the UK overnight.
Yeah.
And it was a tough time. You'd get in the taxi, and the taxi man would say, "Oh, who do you work for?" And you'd be like, "Oh, I work in HR." Try not to give too much away.
I can imagine.
It was a tough time. And the next couple of years really was about major restructuring, major downsizing of the organisation, but also turning it around so that we did, as employees and leaders, we did then embrace that we did work for RBS, and it was going to be a good news story, and we were turning it around. Jumping forward with RBS, I then had the opportunity to go and work in Asia. So I went over as the HR Director for Southeast Asia for Coots, so the wealth management side, which was an amazing couple of years, and we may touch on that a bit later in this podcast. But I spent a couple of years in Asia, returned to the UK, still hungry for some more international experience, and had this opportunity presented to me, which I thought was a little bit crazy, but they were looking for someone to go out and head up India, head up employee relations, dealing with all the trade unions, the politicians, all of the labour relations, head up legal, and also all of the people strategy. So I then embarked on probably the most insane, crazy, and enjoyable 3 years of my career with RBS in India. Sadly, I couldn't stay there all my life, and Vodafone contacted me and offered me the opportunity that I have now, and I returned to the UK 2 years ago.
Wow, pretty epic journey.
There's been a lot, and I was trying to keep it really short because I don't want to bore everyone with it. But it's been fascinating. I've had a good time.
No.
Yeah,
it's about fun. The journey. It's always about the journey, not the end result, right? It's always about enjoying the journey. It sounds like you've enjoyed it.
I've had the most amazing career today, and I know there's still a lot more to come. So yeah, no, I've really enjoyed all of the roles that I've done.
Amazing. So where we are now, moving forward, what really occupies your mind on a day-to-day basis?
Day-to-day, it's probably similar to what you're hearing a lot of HR leaders talking about at the moment, and it's really how are we embracing this digital era that we're moving into?
Yes.
Vodafone is a tech company, so not only are we making sure that we're keeping up with everyone else, but we're really looking at how we're ahead of everyone else. Mm-hmm. So there's huge amounts of work at the moment as to how we put our organisation at the forefront of being a digital leader. So if I just look at day-to-day at the moment, that's everything from how do we just break down the norm of what we've known for how you structure teams, how you lead teams. How do you start thinking about, that agile nature, the scrum teams, the teams that aren't driven by the bureaucracy and the leaders and those budget limitations we put on people. But then also, what's the skill set that we need for the future? We are embracing AI, we are embracing robotics. Lots of organisations are looking at that technology that's not really that far away when we talk about the drones and driverless cars. So what does that mean for our people? What's the skill set that we need? And what's the operating model going to be that we have in the future? So that's definitely forefront of mind in probably most of my meetings day to day at the moment.
Yeah.
And the other huge thing for us at Vodafone, and it's a big thing that you'll have seen in the media earlier this year, is really our gender diversity program. So a huge amount of work we've been doing on our Reconnect program, which is tapping into all of the people that are out of work at the moment because they've taken career breaks for a variety of reasons. Maybe because they've been looking to raise families, carers in the family, or just for other personal reasons. And it's how we connect with that population and get them back into the workplace and attract them to come and work for us at Vodafone. So that's the Gender Diversity Reconnect program is a big thing for us.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Going back to your point you made a moment ago, you certainly are correct about the whole digital transformation that we're experiencing and going through right now. How are you currently preparing your team and the business for that digital transformation?
So if I start with my own team, we actually had an offsite about a month ago where we were really testing and stretching our own thinking around digital and where we thought the future was going. We were looking at a lot of articles that have been written, a lot of sort of the top gurus and their thinking, and beginning to break down all of our own preconceived ideas, because a lot of things that will stop us getting to the future are the HR function and are the senior leaders, where we've been in the businesses sometimes too long or too far in our career, but we're not listening to the younger generation that are coming through, that actually are at the heart and pulse of what we need to be doing, and they have the right ideas. So a lot of it is around how we test our own thinking, how we stretch our own minds, and then putting it into really practical terms as well, Chris. It's about thinking about the art of the possible and really what that's going to mean, doing huge analysis of what our current skill set is in our organisation versus what we think is required in the future, and beginning to think about, if the skills aren't necessarily out there in the market or there's not an abundance of them, how we're going to be developing our own people or sourcing the right candidates that we are going to need for the future.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. I think that's the balance people are finding now, is whether we do bring the talent in, which is definitely in shortage in that area, or upskilling internally, but also how quickly can we do that for the needs that we have in the here and the now. But really good to hear that you guys are already on that journey. When did you roughly sort of start that journey and start thinking about this? Is this a recent, or have you been is this something you've been on the agenda for a while?
It's been on the agenda for a while, and probably the key thing that sparked it for me is we were looking about 2.5 years ago. We started setting up our big data and advanced analytics function, and when you start playing in the space, it's such a hot skill. You are competing with every organisation. Forget your standard competitors. You're competing with all industries to find the top talent.
Yes.
And you can do that for a certain period of time, and you can pay the money, and you can get on this merry-go-round of all sort of looking for the same people. But we really started then take a step back to say, we're going to have to start thinking long-term here.
Yeah.
So we started a lot in South Africa, actually, beginning to work with universities and schools, and how do you start looking at the people that are coming through up on their PhDs? How do we start getting involved so that we can be sponsoring people and building that network and connection with different universities, so that you're building the relationships with people as they're embarking on their studies and in their careers, rather than just trying to bring in those people that have the 10, 15 years experience.
Yeah. That's completely, I think that's the perfect way to look at it. You're looking at further down the line, aren't you? Just not just the here and now. And if you can foster that talent early on, then you're going to be better, much strongly equipped in the future, moving forward. So I think that's a fantastic way to approach it.
And I think. Oh, sorry, Chris.
No, go for it. Go for it. Go for it.
I think there's also, something about us testing our minds as to the employees that we already have as well. I'm not always thinking that the career is a linear journey, but someone that's in HR today, there's no reason that they can't then start looking at coding or different qualifications, and their careers can take completely different turns. So I think there's something about really embracing how you approach development, and how you start thinking about, the different phases of people's career and helping them to switch between different specialisms.
Yeah, I think that's an area where a lot of companies really need to rethink that. Why is it that we pigeonhole people into a particular role or particular skill set? Just because it's not something that's traditionally not their role doesn't mean that's not something they're going to want to learn. For me, in that position, I would think that would really actually highly engage me as an employee. That I have a new opportunity and I have the support from the management team to learn and develop and challenge myself. That's what keeps people engaged. In my mind.
Have you read Linda Grattan's new book? She wrote a book with Andrew Scott called The 100-Year Life.
I know I've seen it everywhere, but I haven't. I definitely need to read it.
You do need to read it, because it starts to say just what we were talking about, that in the past, life used to have 3 phases. You had an education, you used that education and went to work and followed the career that the education had given you, and then you retired. And the 100-year life is saying the world has completely shifted. It's now about you get your education, you go to work, you'll probably have to take time out, re-educate, maybe in something completely different, go back to work, re-educate, go back to work. Because it's saying, the working life, depressingly maybe, is getting a lot longer. And the education that you had when you were in your teens probably isn't going to see you through to your 80s.
No, definitely not. We just had that conversation before the show, didn't we, about the education side as well. And it's funny because as a sales director in my previous company, every single one of my team just came out of university studying everything but sales. Let's say like everything, literally everything but sales. Lawyers, marketeers, the business development, the list goes on, honestly, in terms of the people that came on the team. But some of those members went on to be the best producers in our company, the best people in the operations side, in various different ways. The best person at managing our data as a business. We had a guy who came in as a temp who then, I think 3 years later, was managing the data for all of the events across the globe.
Yeah.
It's like, because that's where he found some passion, and we didn't discourage, and we supported it. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said from that. We're so quick to look outside the business for the skill set rather than actually fostering internally. So you're the first person to bring that up, which is strange for me. Not to hear more people talk about.
I think it should be high up there on people's minds.
Yeah, definitely. Could you obviously you've had so many great obviously I'm sure you've been through many transformations across the businesses that you've been through and many projects, I'm sure. Could you share one of the projects and transformations or transformations that you've been through that you're most proud of? Across any of the businesses, doesn't have to be Vodafone.
Of course, gosh, there's always so many. Probably the one that really sticks out for me was going back, probably about 5 years ago now. And it was when I went to Southeast Asia with Coots. It was a fascinating time. And the reason that I was asked to go out was the business was in a real crisis. The CEO that we'd had there, who was hugely successful and a leader that was absolutely loved by his people, left our organisation. And within 6 weeks of him leaving, 60% of the employees left the organisation.
Wow.
An amazing, if you ever wanted to do a case study on where fantastic leadership can then go so horribly wrong for an organisation.
How many employees were there, if you don't mind me asking? How many employees were there?
So it was about 500 employees and we lost 60%. So it was a fairly substantial upheaval to the business. And we lost a lot of the leadership team. I was asked to go out along with a new CEO, CFO, Chief Risk Officer, a number of others. We literally had to put almost a brand new leadership team in place. And the task that we had was really to make the call to say, can we now rebuild this business? Is it salvageable, or actually is this business now completely ruined? And with the kind of clients you're dealing with in Coots, it's very wealthy individuals. And this is a very, very strong client relationship, the way that you do business. And so when you've had such an upheaval, it's also impacting on your revenues, your reputation. And so the proudest achievement when I look back is not an individual achievement, but it was an achievement of the leadership team that went out, the leaders that did remain with the business and work with us, and the way that we completely turned that situation around. Wealth management, especially in Asia, is a hot skill. There's a shortage of great private bankers in the industry. So to go out and have to completely rebuild the organisation, we had to really be quite creative with our thinking as to where we would attract people. We had to look at bringing whole teams over, or attracting and poaching whole teams from competitors, because the ones and twos weren't going to work. You needed to bring the teams across with their clients. And how you were going to keep the culture of the organisation intact, or as it was, we created a new culture. But, what was our identity as a team going to be? And that's the biggest achievement. When I look back on that, I was there for 2 years, and by the time I left, we'd rebuilt that business. Our client base was stronger, our product offerings were stronger, the revenues were absolutely on track with where they were meant to be. And it's a huge achievement when I look back of being part of that leadership team that turned that business, and I suppose turned the situation around.
I can imagine. Sounds like there's so many moving parts to that as well that you had to address. What would you say is the biggest challenge that you had to overcome? Probably
the first challenge was actually the reputation of the organisation, because the market's ruthless, and the media do like a good story. So the media in Asia were very keen to talk about our organisation, being over, the downfall of us. And so turning that reputational image around, and being out in the market, being at events, talking to people, letting them know that we were here, we were strong, and we were going to go forward was one of the biggest areas. Mm-hmm. And then the creative thinking. We had to start looking at how not only we would bring existing wealth managers in. It actually goes back to what we were talking earlier, but I started looking at how you could find people that had the right transferable skills that we could then train up to be wealth managers. We could educate them. We could put them through all the qualifications, and that we could build our pipeline. So we were looking at that side as well.
Mm-hmm. So for anyone in our community that perhaps loses a key figure in their management team, what are the steps or the first steps that you would recommend they take when they're in a similar position?
So if you've got that key leader that's leaving, don't underestimate the ripple effect it's going to have in your organisation. Proactive communications, getting out there, locking in the key leaders that you need in that business to keep it going forward, and just keep communicating. Be transparent, be clear, and engage with all of the leaders and the employees. And we made some fundamental mistakes at that time.
No, sure. I can imagine. So, what was the end result from that? What was the end result of this after you kind of guys went in? What kind of impact did that have on the business, and what was the outcome?
So we completely turned that business around. It was, as I was saying, by the time I left, we had grown the organisation, we had grown the client base, the product offerings. I was there just for the turnaround, so I left 2 years later, having recruited my successor with a strong leadership team and a strong business for them to go forward. I have to be honest, I haven't actually checked in with them for about 18 months now, so I don't know how the business is doing. As we're talking, it's making me think I need to make a couple of calls. But, it was a strong team that was in place to take that business forward.
Fantastic. And for now, where you are within Vodafone, where do you see sort of the biggest opportunity for improvement in the business, and how is HR helping the company deliver on those objectives?
The biggest improvements. I'm going to feel like a broken record, but it is around that digital world. But it's both sides. It's making sure, what is digital and why are we all talking about digital, about being disruptive in the digital space? You kind of got to still keep the end goal as to what's your driver for this? What are we doing for the customers? What is it that we're trying to achieve and deliver? But also don't forget the employees, because there's something about what are we doing for them that's digital. They also are craving different technologies, different ways of interaction, different ways of working. So there's a huge side, both from looking at where the business is going and where our customers are going, but what our employees need and want and how they want to operate and work. And HR has a role to play on both of those sides. And particularly when you're looking at the people, if we're not helping to lead and drive the thinking in that space, the business will be focusing, rightly or wrongly, on the customer and putting that first. And you need just to make sure that you don't forget your own people in that journey. Yeah.
I think you're right. Everyone's really caught up in this era that we're going through now, but it's quite great way to look at it, the way you said, is look at the business needs and the employee needs, then work backwards. Then work backwards towards the technologies, and that way, what are the talent, culture, and leadership tools that we need to support the goal of the business or the goal of the people within the business. And I think this is such a big improvement now with the tools that are out there and the ways that you can now reach your employees is incredible. And especially now we're in the mobile driven world that we're in. You have to be able to adapt the systems that you have to be mobile first or mobile friendly, because that's the way you're going to get the best engagement when trying to communicate with employees and giving them the tools in their hands to be able to review their own data and to get answers to their own questions in a very easy to way manner without having to wait for someone manually to reply to them. So there's so many benefits both for the people and for the business. I think the big challenge for a lot of our members is where to begin. Where do you start? That's the question. Where do you start?
And, what you were just saying is spot on, because every interaction that we have with our employees now, we've done it so that you can do it through an app. It's not all in one app, it's several apps. But whether it's your online learning, so the university, it's through the app on your phone. You can access all of your personal data. You can make changes on your phone. And we also actually even start our recruitment, especially with our graduate scheme. It's all done through gamification and videos, which people at university can just do on their phones whenever they want. They do video interview where the questions come up, because that's the world that we're living in now.
Yeah. You only need to go on the underground or the train or the bus or anywhere, and you look up, and 90% of the train are sitting there on the phone or looking at the phone, watching a video. And now, especially with the move, there's a move away now. Audio and video is the media format of the future, right? In terms of learning. So it's great that you. I saw a girl put a graduate today actually on LinkedIn. LinkedIn have just released video, right, where you can use it directly from your mobile. For the first time, you can go on your mobile, upload a video to LinkedIn. So what she did was just literally, selfied herself and videoed her saying, look, I've left university, these are my skills, and I'm looking for a job. And then posted it on LinkedIn, tagged in all of the big companies she wanted to work for, and I think it had over 5,000 comments and multiple job offers. So and I was like, well, and she was ecstatic, and she even had the president, I think the CEO, a co-founder actually of LinkedIn, reply to her saying really good to hear that that you're putting our video platform to good use from the founder of LinkedIn. So it just shows you how the technology now is so disruptive. And I imagine that versus her sending in a CV to a company which has 10,000 a week. So
how exciting is that? I mean, as you were telling me the story, I was thinking, damn, I need to go and have a look, see if she's still available.
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you. I was amazed. Yeah, it was so simple. It wasn't really like she planned it or had a whole. She just said, this is who I am, this is my skill set, this is what I'm passionate about, and I really love to work for new companies, and copy them in. So simple things like that. Yeah, exactly. So it just shows you now that if companies aren't communicating with their employees in those type of formats, then it's going to be it's crazy. Basically, so it's crazy. It's the same reason why we're talking right now, right? For the podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's the same reason we're talking right now, because I know for HR leaders are very busy. They get calls all day long from poor people like me sometimes, and my team. But on the way to work, it's a good way to consume content, listen to it via audio, or even some of the members I speak to even listen to it in the gym. I don't know why they would want to listen to me in the gym and another HR leader, but they do. So yeah, it works, right? Easy to digest content. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the way of the world nowadays.
Definitely, it's great to hear that you're so passionate about that change as well. You're either running towards the changes and embracing technology, or you're running away. There's no in the middle. You got to be fully in, and that's it. You have
to be fully in. And when you work for a technology company, I'd be really concerned if I was an HR leader in the organisation not being fully embracing and driving it.
I'm sure that helps you a little bit as well. So, what's where you are now? What are your, because it's always great talking about your company, but what are your personal goals in your career of what you would like to achieve, both inside and outside of the company?
So personal goals. Personal goals, if I look outside of the company, and Chris, we were speaking about this earlier, I have an upbringing where I was brought up in children's homes and a lot of foster care. So my personal goals are really a continuation of a lot of work that I do outside of the corporate life, which is working with different charities, with underprivileged children, with children that just haven't had some great breaks in life. And just need that extra support. To date, it's been a lot more around the volunteering side, but a big goal that I was speaking to my boss about recently, actually, was really wanting to take that further and have more of a voice, and probably looking at some NED roles in some of the charity space around children just with similar upbringings to myself.
Yeah.
So a very personal goal to me, something that's really important to me. And just having the opportunity to really help shape and make a difference in that particular part of the community. So that's my big personal goal.
Fantastic.
Career-wise, I just
become a HR tech guru.
Yeah, well, career-wise, I was speaking about this on a webinar recently. Career-wise and personal development, I kind of feel that I need to go and start learning what coding is all about.
I've tried so hard. Code.org. Have you tried Code.org yet? For anyone who's listening who wants to learn how to code, Code.org. It was funded by Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and all of those guys. So you should check it out.
And you know a guru in this coding malarkey?
No, listen to this. I got up to a couple of days, right? So it's hard. They use games. They use like Angry Birds and various different games you're learning to code, but you're actually playing a game. So it's very gamification essentially, but for coding. So you have no idea you're coding. You're just leading someone around the puzzle, etc. So I got to a few weeks in, and honestly, the learning curve it's okay for the first few weeks, but then it gets very complex. And that's where I kind of dropped off and got quite frustrated. What was absolutely amazing is that I started this journey with my nephew, who's 6. And he is so far ahead of where I got that now when he comes over to my mum's house every Sunday, I can't help him anymore, which is actually embarrassing. So I'm sitting there, he's coding. He's playing Frozen, the game Frozen, like Disney Frozen, coding. And I'm no longer there because his mind is so open. So I think there is I do think it's possible to learn, but it's like when you're learning a language when you're a child, you can consume that content a lot easier. But when you get older, it becomes more and more difficult. So I've tried more than I really, because I'm a big geek, a tech geek, anyone who knows me. But it's insane to see children just consume it, and they take it on as another language. But every adult that I've seen try has been difficult. Not saying you can't do it. I believe in you. You can do it.
Do you know what? And Chris, I believe in you. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to be back in contact, and we're going to struggle through this together.
Code.org.
We'll never compete with your 6-year-old nephew, but we'll see how we get on.
Honestly, I've built a chatbot, which I'm quite proud of. So we've got a chatbot now. So we have a chatbot built in our website that it helps our members out. When they subscribe to it, it sends them updates, it answers some questions. It saves me hours and hours every month that I would normally have to reply to a message. That was great. But with all of these tools that are out there,
it sounds like you've done okay on this.
No,
you're putting yourself down. I think you've done okay.
I'm just copying other people's scripts and code, and then making it your own. That's what I'm doing. I'm what they call is I think they call you a script kid, which is that's the sort of industry terminology where you use other people's amazing work and code to create projects. But it's great because you're creating it in new ways, right? But coding from scratch is a whole. It's a whole nother world. I just like to understand it. Now I can see it and I understand what I'm looking at. And that was my main goal of understanding it and the basics. But actually doing it from scratch I think I'll be a billionaire by now if I knew how to do that. So I'm going to do this for a couple of weeks, and then I'm potentially going to change my personal goal to become did you say script kid? Script kid. A script kid's people that just copy and paste other people's code and use it.
So that's good. I'll do a couple of weeks of coding to understand enough. Then I'll become a script kid, then I'll just look like I know what I'm talking about. We're changing my goals as we talk. Perfect.
Good. All right. We've just added another one. But going back to what you, on a serious note, going back to what you said earlier about also your upbringing, there can't really be many things out there that are a lot more meaningful than something like that. You know my background as well, so I can relate in some way to that, and also I'm sure that must provide you with so much energy. The energy you must get back from that, it must be amazing to bring that back, and I'm sure that must energize you all the time, going through that and keep you. So
it's personally rewarding as much as rewarding to people that I'm working with. So I get just as much from it.
That's what's amazing.
It just reminds me, don't ever listen to people that tell you can't do things. Don't ever believe. I love those people.
They're my favorite people because I love proving them wrong.
Exactly, they give you the biggest energy.
Oh, it's funny. I'll tell you. We're in a podcast now. We're going to go off topic, but I'm going to talk about it anyway.
Yep.
When I grew up, obviously I told you it's quite a rough upbringing. Single parents, the whole story of East London, and it wasn't easy. But I definitely wouldn't be where I am right now, because it was tough and I had to fight to be where we are. But
Exactly.
the funny thing is all of my friends growing up say, you can't do that. You're not. I said to them, before I'm 30 years old, I'm going to own my own company. I'm going to be married and I'm going to buy my first house. Now, that was this month, I've just turned 30 on the 22nd of August. I got married the week before that and we started this company. And I'm talking to you right now. So
all the boxes.
Yeah, without those people that told me you can't do that, I wouldn't have been able to do it, because I love it. I think you take it two ways, right? Some people get disheartened. I love it, and all of the sports that I've been good at and the skills that I've learned. It is what my business partner said. You can't do a podcast, Chris. You have no idea. How do you know how to set up the camera to do Adobe Photoshop and edit? I know I'm very good at Photoshop now. It took me 3 weeks. So it's it's I love that. I think that's why I'm alive. Why else would you get up every morning if you're not learning new things?
But it's why I'm where I am. I remember going for the interview for sixth form, and I was living in a children's home at the time, and the headmaster of the school just looked at me and said, "Claire, we are counting down the days that you leave us. We are never going to take you on for sixth form." Now, Chris, I was a really good student. I left the GCSEs. I was not a bad child. And I just thought, you know what, that was the biggest motivation. And for years, I never even planned to get a degree. But because my headmaster wouldn't even take me for sixth form, I was like, that's it. I will now go and get a degree and be really successful.
Yeah. You find people that are either on one side of that or the other. Like, some people get really disheartened, and then whereas like myself, my business partner, a lot of my close community, my community, it's funny, you attract those type of people around you. So a lot of my friends are the same, and then we get even more competitive. There's nothing more crazy than people that are competitive together, then challenging competitive people. Then it goes a bit crazy, to the point where we're on a daily basis, whether it's in the gym, whether it's running to work, whatever it may be, we're always challenging each other and pushing beyond that boundary. So I think that's the only way.
It can be so energizing.
It's so good. I always, my wife, I feel sorry for her, because I'm always trying to drag her into some new hobby. And every month she's like, "Oh my God, you've got another. This month's obsession is bouldering." So it's like rock climbing, but without the ropes. And she's like, "Oh my God, I've went and bought the shoes already. We haven't even been yet, and I've already bought the shoes and all of the stuff." So, but back to the podcast. I'm sure everyone on the podcast is going to take away a lot from that. But it goes back to what we just said earlier about, right, your employees. You need to challenge them, keep them intellectually motivated, support the innovation, support the growth. And then I very highly doubt you'll be losing employees if you have that approach as well. So this leads us on quite nicely to what we do is like a quick fire round. So where I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no more than 30 seconds to give us some incredible answers. Are you ready?
I feel the pressure. Go for it.
Feel the pressure. So what was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a senior leader in HR?
Exactly what we were just talking about. It was learning just to be comfortable with who I was, where I'd come from, and the fact that I was just a little bit different as an HR leader, and that was okay. And just embrace being changed, being different, and find an organisation that wants different.
Great, fantastic. And what's the best piece of business advice you've ever received in your career?
I think I probably mentioned a reference in part earlier. The best advice: be transparent and clear. Tell people as much as you can. The more that you tell people about the direction of the business, what you're doing, what you're trying to achieve, they'll understand it, they'll buy into it, they'll feel part of it, and they'll be on the journey. Just be as transparent as you can.
Good and bad.
Absolutely.
Good and bad.
Yeah, treat people as adults.
Yeah, people love. I think I see a lot of companies. They love to be transparent when it's things that are going well. When it's great, they love talking about it. It's actually, I think you actually need to have more conversations when they're not going well and be even more transparent, because that's
and then people understand why the business is doing things or making certain decisions,
and they respect it too. Similar with my team, I would always be very open and honest with them, and not try and hide anything, good or bad. And I know years from now that when I have conversations with them, they mention, I respect you a lot more for that, because it wasn't nice to hear that, but we addressed it and we moved on, and now we can deal with the problem. Right now we know we can deal with the problem and move on with it. So great approach. I think you mentioned a book earlier, but I'm not sure if you have another one in mind. But what's one book that you would recommend to our audience, and why?
So it'd actually be a different book. It's a book that I read on my holiday over the summer. It's a book by David Taylor, and it's called How to Be Successful by Being Yourself.
Oh,
so hardly a surprise with all the things that I've just been talking about.
Yeah.
But such a great book. Embrace who you are, embrace what you've got. You are who you are. Everything that you need to be successful, you've already got. And it's a really inspirational and practical book. So recommend that one.
Mm-hmm. I can definitely relate to that as well, and I'm sure many people, if they are honest with themselves, they will also be able to relate to that, because it seems that you're always trying to fit into someone else's box. Anything. When I first came into the corporate world, I was like, well, I'm from East London, I haven't got the greatest accent, so maybe they're going to say, oh, you can't work here because you don't sound right. All these different things are going through your head all the time. But as you said, you need to find someone to embrace who you are, and if they don't, then perhaps they're not the best company for you to be working with.
Absolutely.
You seem quite like a prolific learner, or someone who's always open to learning. Do you have any tools or websites or productivity tools that you use to keep you up to date with current events?
So what I've started looking at, which has been really different, I started joining a lot of the crowdsourcing platforms, and I find those fascinating. It's the platforms that you can go on if you've got a problem or an idea, a problem or something that you're looking for a solution for. You can put it out there, and everyone from all around the world can see it. They can come up with different ideas, and there's opportunities to win money. Mm-hmm. And I just find it amazing to go onto some of these platforms and tools, just to see the kind of problems that people are putting out there, from big multinational organisations to different small startups. And the reason I'm loving it is just the breadth of insights I'm getting from across industries of what companies are tackling and looking at the moment.
Great, and because you're not just getting your industry's insights, so you're getting someone else's perspective, and some of the best innovations are going on outside of what you know.
Some of the most interesting companies that are using it are oil and gas companies, and some of the problems that they're putting out at the moment absolutely apply to so many different organisations, and it's fascinating just to see some of the conversations and see some of the problems being discussed.
Really, I've done something small. We have an online community, and I've just literally implemented a new section to it, and it's basically where you can post a challenge, and when you post that, our members get notified, and then people can help. And it's also added the gamification side to it as well, that people that help, then they're more rewarded, etc. So it's encouraging that engagement, but allowing you to post a challenge in a private community. As you know, we only have the HR practitioners in there, and then some of the responses from the community has been amazing, and we've never really found a challenge in the community that we haven't been able to solve as a collective, and that's what's quite exciting about it. There's no one size fits all, there's no one approach, but there's multiple different perspectives and the way companies are working that have always helped, and that's why we do this in the first place. So great to hear that. I would love for you to send me over some links that I can include in the description as well, if anyone else is interested.
Yeah, will do.
Thanks a lot. And I suppose that leads us towards the end. I suppose well, first of all, you've been an amazing guest. Thank you for joining us. Great to have a conversation with you, albeit an unconventional one, which is even more exciting. So that's great. And give our listeners a parting piece of guidance, and also the best way to get in contact with you.
So, parting guidance: stop talking about work-life balance. For me, probably one of the biggest things that really changed my life was, actually find a job that you love, a company that you have a passion for, and a company that embraces you and values you for your strengths. Work is part of your life, so just make that part of your life something that you love just as much as your personal side of life. Break the work-life balance myth. Is probably my parting guidance. Best way to contact me: LinkedIn, Claire Gillingham, Vodafone. You'll be able to find me, or email me. It's claire.gillingham@vodafone.com. And people really, I love to talk. I love to have the opportunity to hear what other people are up to. So please do get in contact.
Fantastic. Well, we definitely know from this podcast that you love to talk, which is fantastic. I wouldn't have it. I wouldn't have it. No, I'm joking. I'm just joking. I wouldn't have it any other way. It'd be a pretty boring podcast otherwise, wouldn't it? So...
I think we didn't even manage to do the 30 seconds minimum time for the quick fire round either.
Don't worry about it. No one does. I'm going to probably delete that bit out. No, I mean, the 30-second part, no one ever does 30 seconds. I really like to, the point you made a second ago, by the way, about the work-life balance, because I forget that I'm even at work half the time, and it is an absolute world apart from previous jobs that I've done, where you're counting down the hours to go home, and you use that terminology you mentioned about work-life balance, and you have to have work this many hours in a day. Whoever said that's the many hours? Who made that up? I think the Industrial Revolution made the 9 to 5, if I'm not correct, and that's why they made that. But I find myself sometimes up to 2-3 o'clock in the morning editing videos, having conversations with people in the US, and it's so exciting. And I think people outside of that don't understand it, because unless you're in a job which you really enjoy and a company you love, it's hard to explain it to someone else. You normally get called the workaholic, right? Or that's what I get called by my friends anyway, and my wife.
I just call it enjoying life.
Enjoying life. Exactly. So really, really refreshing to hear you say that. Guys, head over to hrleaders.com. There you'll find all of the show notes on the episode, everything we've been talking about, timestamps, links, the books that are recommended. Again, thank you very much for joining us on the show today, and I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Thank you so much.